Hey, Cédric, welcome back. You are our
Hello.
resident guest.
Yes, and I'm honored to be. I feel
Welcome
honored.
and glad to have you here again. Today we start with a small delay. That happens. I guess that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. So we want to jump right into it and make up for the 10 minutes that we lost. Your life changed. You became a parent recently. Tell us how your day looks like now. How is the day in the life of the father, Cédric, looking like?
Of course, and first I want to defend my daughter. It's not her fault that I was 10 minutes late. I was out filming an episode for YouTube and totally forgot what the time was. And so I had to sprint back for like 10 minutes. So how has my day changed? Well, Lana was born pretty much 4 weeks to the day ago now, and it's been an incredible journey. Just so fascinating to see her learn and spend time with her. And there's just something so pure about small kids that just fascinates me. My day, so Elena, my wife, and I, the way we split responsibilities is, at least for the time being, she has stopped working, at least for the maternity leave, which is 3 months here in Switzerland. So she is the prime caretaker, and I make sure we still perform on the business side. And with the Tomahawk team that has recently grown quite a bit as well, I make sure things run smoothly. In terms of how my day has changed, it's gotten better. Like every time that I have like 30 or 45 minutes now, either between calls or in the morning after I come back from my workout, or in the evening, I usually sign off a bit sooner or earlier than I have in the past. I go and spend it with Lana. One of the activities that we really enjoy is bathing. So I'm usually in charge of bathing her, and that's just a fascinating experience. But also more mundane stuff like just I don't know, just holding her for a bit, going for a quick walk, or changing her diapers, which is an activity that I thought I would probably never want to do, and kind of like that was probably one of the bad associations that I had with babies in the past. It's actually a really fulfilling experience because it's something that I can do to help her. It's something where we can bond, time that we can spend together. And so overall, I'd say it's just been a fascinating journey so far.
Nice. Do you take cold baths, like you take cold showers?
Well, Elena and I have a bit of a discussion around that. For now, I think we're going to stick to normal temperature baths. I don't want to.
Okay.
I don't want to introduce her to cold baths in her first month of her life. But we'll see when she gets a bit older and she can have a say and she can express if it's too cold or too warm for her. Then we'll definitely go and experiment and swim in the lake as well.
Yeah, it might be a bit too shocking to start with the cold bath right away.
Yeah.
I also wonder, you mentioned like you still do your workouts and so on. Is it easy for you to follow your habits, your positive habits that you established before becoming a parent, or were there any challenges faced in that regard?
The way I went about it was not to pressure myself too much to stick to whatever goals and routines I had put in place before Lana was born, to kind of ease into the new situation. And then I found it after the first week was pretty turbulent. That's when Elena and Lana were still at the hospital for the first 3 or 4 days. And so there's a lot of back and forth. It was first bringing her home to our home and setting her up and making sure, and lots of talk about how we like her rhythm and just discovering how she communicates with us. So that was a lot of, I'd say that was a bit more turbulent, but then pretty much after the second week, Elena and I built our habits, and it was easy for me to go back and get my workouts in. I usually either do them at home or just outside our home, or I've also gotten a gym membership to a gym that's very nearby. That's like 2-3 minutes away from here. And so typically in the morning I would get up, leave the house, go to the gym, get my workout in. And then on my way home, I would get breakfast for Elena, quickly make her a couple pieces of bread or whatever. And then at 8:30, we usually jump on a team call with the Tomahawk team because the team has grown quite a bit recently. We check in with one another once a day, 30 minutes, and that usually starts at 8:30 CET. So that's when I'm kind of, from then on, I'm in front of my laptop and I'm getting stuff done.
Awesome. So just a quick note to everybody listening or watching to this, if you do have any questions for Cédric, post them in the comments and we can address them during this live session. This is the goal here is to be really interactive. So if you do want to know anything, ask us in the comments.
But and also, of course, I just want to add to that. Of course, also if you have questions for Silvan, post them, and I'll make sure to pick them up because I can actually see the questions as well. So he's not going to be able to sneak around the questions.
Shit, I wasn't.
Make him go once, tough ones.
Okay. But what I was actually wondering about, if life changed in terms of importance of things. So is there anything, of course, that got more important, but also things that got less important for you now with the birth of your daughter?
I mean, one thing that's definitely true is it was a major life upgrade. Like I think I'm even happier now with where I am. The little one, she brings so much joy to Elena and me that I don't know. It's just it's next level. It's hard to describe. It's also something that I probably would have been very skeptical about if I had heard this like 6 or 12 months ago. But it's so. It's like a whole different type of venture, right? And maybe that comparison isn't even fair, but I think a lot about how to scale myself and what legacy I want to leave in the world and how I want to positively impact the world. And mostly I do that by helping entrepreneurs build their companies, or I've built companies in the past that I think solve problems that need to be solved and teams that need to come together to solve them. But having a baby, a child, is just, it's so next level. It's so fun to see her learn and pass on some of our thoughts and the way we see life and our energy. So I'd say maybe not more or less important. I think that was kind of expected that she would probably be at the center of everything once she's here. But I would say one thing that it has changed is it's making me hold myself to even higher standards, because I usually think about, like, now when I do stuff, I think about like, okay, what would Lana think about me, like seeing me do this or that, or how would she, how can I be the right role model, the role model, the person that she looks up to that I want to be.
Right.
And I think that's a really good way to better myself. I think it's even more fun to improve now on a daily basis.
Nice. Yeah, that's the spirit that you love. I also, you mentioned that Elena is taking a break right now, and also really, spending and taking care of Lana. How did you handle that? Because when we last talked, you weren't sure whether you would also take a break or if you just continue working, or a mix of that. Now it sounds like you're just continuing to work as normal. So how do you handle that part?
Yeah, Elena and I try to be very much in sync. And so if there's something where I need to step in and spend time with Lana, I'm trying to keep my calendar somewhat flexible, so I can always take an extra hour or two off throughout the day if needed. The reality is she's doing a kick-ass job. I think it's been 1 or 2 days where I did that, and I took over for a couple hours during the day, but otherwise Elena's been really kick-ass with handling Lana and everything that comes with her. Truth is, I feel like we've added a few children on the Tomahawk side as well. So I'm also spending a lot of time educating everyone and bringing everyone on board and bringing them up to speed. And I guess it's also kind of hard to draw a line between what is work and what isn't work for me, because often I would just, even on the weekend, I'd sit down and I write about the way I look at projects, the way we evaluate founders, that kind of stuff, because that's really what interests me. And I guess in one way it's connected to work, but on the other hand, it's also just so natural for me to do. I guess the important piece is that I do have flexibility, and if I do want to spend time with Lana, or if Elena needs to take or wants to take some time off, then we can usually make it happen with a few exceptions.
Yeah, that's great. And were there also things where you said like you underestimated the challenge of becoming a parent? So things that you thought were actually much easier, but then turned out to be way more difficult or harder than you imagined.
Well, so what a lot of my friends told me about was be ready to not sleep a lot. And I feel like I was ready for that, to wake up a couple of times during the night, even though now I don't really, because Elena takes care of her during the night. So I might not sleep as well as before all the time, but in general, I've pretty much gone back to the rest that I was getting before. Maybe one thing that can kind of trip you or surprise you is that it's just nonstop, right? There's never a moment now where you're just by yourself. So even once I do finish work tonight, there's someone waiting for me to spend time with her. And she sometimes demands it pretty loudly. And I think that's something to be conscious of. I think for Elena and me, it was not that big of a difference, because even before, we kept ourselves pretty busy. It was rare that we would just lay in bed and watch TV or just do something by ourselves. We were pretty active before this. So that's maybe less of a challenge. I think one emotion that I underestimated is this caring about Lana, and especially when you can't figure out what it is that she needs, if she's hurting or what's going on, if she's crying and you can't figure out why she's crying right away. This feeling of being or of helplessness, that I think is tough at the beginning, and it takes some getting used to, and it takes a bit of a relaxed approach to just take it one step at a time and discover and figure out what it is that she wants. And I think after the first couple of weeks, I've built like a repertoire of things that I can try. So sometimes she's hungry, and that's pretty easy to find out. If I just give her my finger and she sucks on it, then I know now it's time for mommy to feed her. Other times she wants to just be entertained. She wants you to carry her around and move a bit and show her different lights. Like she doesn't see color yet, is what I'm told, and she doesn't see far yet, but she can see lights, and she can see bright spots and dark spots and kind of differentiate between that. And sometimes I think it's just fascinating for her if we walk around here and she can look at the lamps and everything that we have here.
Sure. It's also keeping you fit. I think that's a nice benefit on top of that.
Yeah. Although, I mean, she can't go on really long walks yet. At this age, I think she usually gets hungry every 90 to 120 minutes on average. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's 4 or 5 hours, but on average, like she wants to be back and being fed after like 1.5 or 2 hours. But we do take long walks from time to time.
Nice. So you also mentioned, the beautiful parts of it. Obviously, somebody's waiting for you and also ask for your attention. But on top of that, maybe there are also surprising benefits that you just now experience that you would have never thought about before, that they would actually happen, or that they would be benefits in these areas. So is there anything that comes to mind that really surprised you as a benefit of becoming a parent?
Well, the number one thing, and I think I already mentioned it, but it's definitely this just natural drive to become the best version of yourself. So you can be there for your kid and you can be a role model to them. I think now even more than before, every action that I take, I kind of think about what are the consequences of this, and I do a quick risk reward analysis. Is this really worth the risk? Is it really and also, is this really worth my time, or should I be spending my time with Lana instead, and like not pick up yet another project that I want to work on?
Right. Do you have an example that you can walk us through how you actually, made these thoughts, and how you then think about these long-term things that are also important for your daughter?
Let me try and see if I can come up with a concrete example. I guess one is like really basic. I just like some mornings I wake up and then I'm still tired, and for a moment I feel like I think I'm just going to sleep in today and not go work out. And then there's this like voice in the back of my mind that says, nope, be the best version of yourself. Wouldn't it be cool to show Lana how disciplined you are and how well you've taken care of yourself all this time? So that's maybe one, not the best example. I guess other times.
From my perspective, that's something that you always had. Like from my perspective, you've always been a very disciplined person in that regard. So now it's, for me, surprising that this is even stronger now with Lana in the world around you. Because I thought like, okay, you're already at a pretty high level in that regard.
So I've always been trying to hold myself to a high standard. I think you never reach the ceiling, right? Otherwise, you're not aiming high enough. So I guess in that aspect, that's maybe one thing. What are some other things that have surprised me, or situations where I've heard her voice in the back of my head? I think in general, I've also become more balanced. I think in situations where before I maybe would have kind of dived into a discussion or fight, like now I'm also asking myself even more, like, is this, like, pick your battles. Is this worth becoming emotional, or is this just a misunderstanding maybe? Or I think it's giving me this extra layer of reflection.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Maybe that's one. Yeah.
We also have the first question. It's probably not like directly or entirely related to the topic that we just discussed about becoming a parent, but there are certain links that certainly also apply here. So Julius Rummel asks, Cédric, how do you deal with fear? For example, the fear of failure in that regard.
Well, so maybe to speak to that concrete example first, the fear of failure. I think failures are a great tool to get better. I think failure has often helped me learn about myself, learn about the world, learn about people that I worked with, friends, family, and so on. So in a lot of ways, I don't think failure is something bad. I also feel that if I don't fail every now and then, I'm not aiming high enough, I'm not setting the right standards, and I try to shoot higher. I guess it's just in my nature that I've never, since from an early childhood, I felt like I was not like the other kids in a lot of ways. I was always a bit of an outsider for big parts of my childhood. And I think that's kind of giving me the superpower that it's okay to be different, and it's okay to be failed. It's okay to not fit in the box that society wants to put you in. And I think at a very early age, that's allowed me to adapt this mindset that it's better to aim really high and fail 9 out of 10 times, but at the 10th time to make something that no one would have expected. So I think that's in general my approach to fear of failure. Now, fear in general, the emotion of fear, I think is something that can be quite powerful. One fear that I have to some degree, and this is not something that's in my mind all the time, but just there's some diseases out there like cancer that I feel very helpless against. I feel like no matter how healthy I try to live and how often I get checkups, it's something that can hit you and take over your life. And the way I deal with that is that I just try to be very conscious, that I try to value every single day, that I try to say the things that I want to have said in my life and do the things that I want to have done in my life. But I guess that fear never completely goes away. But as I said at the beginning, it also doesn't, it's not, I don't let myself be controlled by that fear. It's just something that I use I try to use it as a positive tool to be even more conscious and enjoy life every single day. Maybe if it wasn't I think Julius asked me, but also for you, Silvan, how do you deal with fear or other powerful emotions in your life?
Yeah, I think I recently did a lot of like studying in that area because it was like super interesting, and I also felt that I had like some lack in these areas because I didn't think too much about it. And for me, fear can actually be a very, very powerful thing because it can really unlock creativity and really also a lot of energy. If you are afraid of something to happen, or you fear something specific, you can really move mountains to get out of that fear. And that can be a really, really powerful thing to then also have a lot of progress in a super short amount of time. So for me personally, I tried to understand where in my body do I feel that stuff, and then really see, okay, I understand that this is fear, not another feeling, and then try to act accordingly and understand where does it come from, what is basically creating that fear, and how can I get out of that situation in terms of what do I need to move forward, or what am I not seeing or not accepting that is generating that, and then how I can move forward in a positive way. So for me, fear is really a very, very powerful thing to unlock a lot of creativity and energy. Of course, always with certain limits and boundaries. Living all the time in fear is probably not a good advice, but if used in good control, basically, it can be incredibly powerful.
Do you have a concrete example where fear was kind of helping you becoming more focused or completely in the moment and solving things one step at a time?
Yeah, I think there are many small examples. If you think about your business and you have like competitors suddenly entering a market that you're also active in, then you suddenly feel like, okay, now we check everything. Where do we have like open borders that we need to close to really strengthen our positioning? Maybe you then double down with your account management and call all your clients just to make sure that they're really happy and in sync with you. And you should have probably done that way earlier. You should have probably set up regular client calls before from day one, but there was no necessity to do so because you were the only one in the market, which is a very likely scenario in Switzerland or also in other smaller countries. And then there's a competitor entering. You are afraid of losing market share to them. And then suddenly out of nowhere, you get a lot of energy and you call all your clients. You uncover certain things that you might have not done very well in the past, and then basically fix them and really have this strong connection that then in the end protects you. And I think pulling that off with the fear of competition in that regard is just one of many examples that I lived through.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
So now I need to check. There are many more questions coming in. Sorry, you wanted to ask something else?
No, I was just saying, I think that was a very good example about how fear in the business sense can also help you in your business, not just your personal life. Because for some reason, fear is such a powerful thing. I always thought of it in a personal context, but of course it does exist, and maybe even more often in the business world as well, where things change frequently.
Sure. Then on the other hand, I also know that that fear, if you live in constant fear, that's also there are many examples. People that feel like they have a good business idea, they want to start something on their own, but they're always afraid of what other people think of them, or afraid that they will not be able to pay rent at the end of the month because it may take longer time to actually build some revenue. These are all fears, but if you live in the constant fear, then the real big issue is that you might not do anything. You might not move forward any step. And that's then from my perspective, the negative aspect of fear, if you have too much fear for a too long period of time.
I think it's similar with stress, meaning your days are not long enough to get everything done that you need to get done, or you can't really perfect things before you need to present them or before you need to sell them. Where I think for short periods of time, it's something powerful in a positive way. It can help propel you forward, but you got to make sure you get out of that cycle at some point, relax before you enter the next period of stress. Otherwise, it can be, at least to me, it can be destructive. If I'm stressed for too long and I'm not making progress, then it's mostly a negative impact. Whereas short bursts of stress are kind of empowering and give me a lot of energy.
Exactly right. So yeah, I actually also wanted to talk a bit more about the business part. You mentioned that your team at Tomahawk VCs has been growing recently. You also hired a developer to build your own tools. So first of all, I want to know, why did you decide to take that step? Were there not already enough tools out there in the market that you could use?
Yeah, that's a good question. And probably a loaded one. So at Tomahawk, we're now 5 people on the investment side and another 4 people that help us with various tasks. And the 4th person that has just joined on that end, on the ops side, is a JavaScript developer. Why JavaScript? Because there's JavaScript frameworks to build mobile applications, to build backend applications, as well as front end. So that one person can kind of manage full stack of all the applications that we're going to build. Well, yes, there are lots of applications out there. For example, when it comes to a CRM, customer relationship management tool, or a deal management tool, there's probably 10 different tools that we've looked at. In the end, we wanted to take things one step at a time and be 100% in control of the data that we create. And so for that reason, we did start our CRM, I think it was earlier this year, when we set it up using Airtable. For those who don't know Airtable, it's basically a database that gives you a really nice UI. It's not the best database, but it gives you a really nice UI. And so that's where we started to set up a lot of our processes using no-code tools like Zapier and IFTTT. And now lately, Airtable has introduced their own automations. And that's where we used to drive a lot of the processes in Tomahawk, to process deal flow, to scan for certain words, and so on and so forth. But then we want to be extremely efficient with just the few people that we have. We want to look at a lot of deals because we don't have any given geography that we focus on. We look at pretty much all of Europe and all of the US. So that's a lot of deals that we need to be able to process. And we also want to make sure we don't just reactively look at deals, meaning we don't look at just the deals that come to us, but even more importantly, we want to have time, energy, and processes to reach out and look for interesting companies that we want to invest in. And that's why we're trying to automate and build processes around that. We thought, we basically asked ourselves, how, if I have a full day to find a great company that hasn't gotten in touch with us yet, what are the steps that I'm taking? And then some of the things are kind of obvious. I might go and reach out to our portfolio founders and ask them if they've seen any companies that would be worth speaking to for us. Other things might be, I might go and look at bigger startups and see if some of their employees have recently started their own company. So lots of ways, and now we're kind of working through this and creating processes, automated processes for that, so that we can proactively figure out and reach out to the best founders and the best teams. Another thing that we're building internally is a UI to our CRM. So Airtable by itself only offers you kind of that database, that grid view, along with like a form view, but we're building some very simple UI on top of that. And then also, and this would be interesting to hear your feedback, one of the ideas that we're toying with is, well, first of all, we have lots of intro calls and conversations with founders that we're not going to invest in. So in a way, we feel that in the last 6 months, we've seen about 1,000 companies, and we've had about 250 calls, first calls at least, some sort of meeting with those 1,000 companies. So about a quarter of them we do meet, or we have some sort of touch point with them. And in most cases, it just then comes down to saying, no, we're not going to invest. And we always try to give the reason. There's a catalog of reasons, like, for example, you're not building something in a space that we're currently excited about, or we already have an investment in a similar company. That's why we cannot invest in you due to a conflict of interest. But that's usually it. Then it answered that email. And we thought it'd be great if we could create more value for those entrepreneurs that we speak to and give them a lot more fine-grained feedback, because we capture it anyway. When we get on a call, we always have our CRM open and we capture notes. And so one idea that we have is, what if we just sent the call notes out to the founder right after we had that touch point, so they have full transparency on what information we've taken away from this and what our conclusions were, what the questions were that we noted down for the next step, and send it out to them. Now, probably there's some information that we want to keep internal, also because we want to avoid misunderstandings. But in general, I think it would be helpful for founders to get more direct and honest feedback. But curious to hear what you think, right? Given that you currently are in the position of a founder, of an entrepreneur, and you are probably going to have investor conversations. How do you think about this?
I mean, I didn't have investor conversations where I was actually looking for money for quite some time now. Luckily or unfortunately, I don't know. But for me, I really like this transparency aspect, because for me personally, transparency is also a very important part of how I like to work with people and how I like to do business. And in that regard, having the transparency from you as a VC is then for me really a sign that puts you apart. So for me, from my founder's perspective, that gives you a competitive edge over others that don't do that in terms of speed, but also openness and transparency, that then just feels like a better fit for me personally. And I think that's the most crucial part. In the end, it comes down to the values. What values are important to me? Do you share the same or similar values? And then you can actually work together in a good way. If you don't share the same values, you will probably run into issues sooner or later together.
Yep, I agree. So I'll keep you updated. Maybe you can do. Maybe you can be a beta tester of
Sure.
what we're building and give us some feedback.
I'd love to do that.
And if there's anyone else seeing this and has thoughts on this, please leave them in the comments or the question section here. Because it is something that we think about right now, how to do this right, because we also don't want to spark too much of a follow-on discussion. We want to be efficient with not just the entrepreneur's time, but also with our time. And so it will probably need some tweaking. It's something that I haven't seen in my conversations with investors in the past. And maybe there's a good reason, and we'll arrive at that as well and stop it. But for now, I do want to try it out and see what learnings it leads to.
It's great. I also love the fact that you say, hey, there's an issue, and you also build a tech component in your own company to actually solve it. And I think that's a really cool part. Not necessarily that it always have to be a tech component to solve an issue, but I think that's in the space that you're active. That's actually a really nice setup.
Well, I guess one of the realizations that I made when I left my operational role at Dfinity and then thought about what I wanted to do next is I wanted to do something where we can scale value without having to scale the team in a proportional fashion, right? Because earlier in life, I thought it'd be so great to have a company that has like 500 or 5,000 employees. And then over the course of my career and the startups that I've built, I realized that I like smaller companies much, much better. I like to keep things fairly informal, to keep in touch with everyone and to have a pretty good reading of how everyone is doing and how everyone is feeling at any given point in time. And I realized I can probably do that. I'm very unlikely to be able to do that if the company is more than 20, 25 employees. It just doesn't scale beyond that. Right. And so I thought about what are some business models that allow me to scale value without scaling the team too much. And there's really not that many. If you think about it, even in history, there's WhatsApp is a prominent example that I think did this really well, right? With about 20 or 30 people, they basically scaled the company to the value of $18 billion, almost $1 billion worth of value per person. But those business models don't come around that often. And so I kept thinking, and I think being an investor is one opportunity to do this, right? Because we can do more deals, we can write bigger checks, and we can fund teams not only at the very beginning, but also later in their life, and thus scale the value that we create for them, but also the wealth that we can create for our investors. And I think the right way to do this is not by adding more people, but by adding processes, systems, and tools. And that's basically why this was always in the back of my mind when I started Tomahawk, but we had some other things to figure out first. And then this fall, we got ready to bring on our first developer, who is, by the way, is Tony, and is absolutely awesome. He already completed his first product this week. So cool. It's off to a really good start.
And to be honest, at heart, you still miss building, right? That's also another thing.
Yes. I wouldn't say miss, but I definitely want to make sure I keep building. I feel even if I'm not developing, I build stuff in the way that we've built this team, we build principles, we build values. But I do miss building products from time to time, and so it's great to now have that component in our team as well.
Sure. Now let's address a few more questions from the audience. The first one here is, does global first mean that a product idea is only good if you aim for a global target group from day one? This is from Sophia Tsubi. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Otherwise, please excuse me. And it's basically addressing your investment focus, because you say you want to invest in global first companies with Tomahawk VC.
Right. And that's a term, I think rightly, we get a lot of questions about it, because I think we invented it, or at least we didn't see it in many other places. I think it was inspired by remote first and global. And we don't necessarily mean either of those are strict criteria, but we do like founders that, number one, think about building a culture that is inclusive, not just to the employees in their local office, but employees from anywhere. And why do we think that? Well, I believe that remote collaboration has become so easy in the recent years that it's a missed opportunity if you don't make use of it. I think the opportunity cost has become too high. And so we believe that the next big company, the next company that's really going to change the world, will make use of this opportunity to work with talent from all over the world. So that's number one. We want someone that doesn't necessarily build an exclusively remote company, but someone that builds a company culture from the beginning that includes remote employees and is a good fit for them as well. And then second, yes, we do think it's important to think beyond the borders of your home country very early on. Does this mean from the very start? Not necessarily. Use the connections, leverage your network that you have in your home market. But then once there are signs of product market fit, and usually this is between seed round and Series A, that's when I want you to move beyond the home market and test the bigger market. The US, Germany, the UK, whatever it may be, but make sure you build systems and processes early on that work for not just your home market and try and perfect that, but for other markets as well, so that you can become a really scalable business model and company.
Awesome. There's another question. Now it's a bit like we jump from topic to topic, but we just go with the flow of the audience, basically. Mm-hmm. One fun thing is this week, you probably saw it on LinkedIn, it was full of Forbes 30 under 30 rankings and announcements and stuff. So Tomida Odolino, whoever that is, asks, what are your opinions on Forbes 30 under 30? Seems like you don't necessarily need to achieve something big to make the list.
Well, honestly, let me think what kind of touch points I've had. So I haven't even looked at the list for this year, so I might not be 100% in sync with what Tomida is asking. But I think in general, when I look back, some of my friends who have made the list, I do find them really impressive. I usually, the way I remember the list is it's a set of people that have interesting thoughts, interesting opinions, that try something new, that deserve attention. And I think also it's hard to measure achievement at that point in your life, right? A lot of us are just getting started in our 20s. We all or some of us only start to be really in tune and aligned with what we really do want to do with our life. So I think it's fair to give them some slack and say, you have a big idea that you're working on, and that idea doesn't necessarily have to have already turned into something really tangible. But overall, I think it's usually a list of extraordinary and interesting people. I've also proactively reached out to some Forbes under 30 in the past just to have a chat. And so far, my experience was really pleasant. Awesome. You could still be under 30. You're under 30, right? Or
yeah, but approaching 30 pretty fast. No, I still have like 3 years.
Oh, yeah. So
no, but I mean, in the end, I think you need to enjoy the ride about what you're doing, what you're building, work with a fun team. That's the stuff that counts. And then if you get placed on the ranking, sure, might be nice recognition, but that shouldn't be the goal, because I also see many startups here in Switzerland. That's like an issue that I see. many startups, they go from competition to competition, try to win, sometimes not even money, but just like an award or recognition, instead of investing that time into actually building the company and winning over clients and building a solid product. And for me, this is just, from my perspective, sure, it's nice if you don't have to do any of the work and you get put on a list whatsoever. But if you actually have to apply, which I think is also the case for that list, you then have to apply there. You also have to apply for startup competitions. For me, it's just that time is much, much better spent on actually either building the solid product or selling your product. Everything else, I think, is most of the time, not always, but most of the time, a waste of time.
I would 100% agree. There's even, and I'm not going to mention the name, but there was a startup that I think I started to see 6 years ago when I first started investing in 2014. I think there was a startup that never managed to raise money, but they still survived for like 1.5 or 2 years. Because they were so good at these pitch events. They would always pick up, I don't know, like a 30K check here and 20K there and maybe another 50K somewhere. And that's kind of how they kept the startup alive, which was fascinating in its own right. But definitely don't optimize your life to be on one of those lists. Focus on changing the world, and you will automatically get the recognition that you deserve.
Exactly. And the other question here is from Ipkin. Cédric, I would love to be an investor. Can you please tell me how you started? With how much money? What is your advice for someone, for example, with 5,000 euros, who doesn't have yet so much money? Thank you.
So, Ipkin, so how do you become an investor? I think, yes, you need the resources, whether you have them yourselves or you find other people that want to invest through you because you have some particular knowledge or insights that will give you an edge. And so they will have you manage some of their money. But what I think is much more important is the journey to get there, and finding out if you are an investor. First of all, I think there's very different asset classes. There's the public stock market, there's real estate, there's private equity, there's venture capital. And all of these asset classes come with their pros and cons and their very specific risks. And I would say because venture capital and private equity are typically very illiquid asset classes, meaning once you do invest, you do not have access to your money for a long period of time, could be 5 years, could be 10 years or more. Never use money that you might need next year in order to live your life and upkeep your life standards to invest in those projects. So what a lot of people do is invest maybe 5% or 10% of their total assets into such an illiquid asset class. For me, it's a bit different. I early in life realized how passionate I am about startups, and it's really the only thing that I know, but I'm trying to become really, really, really good at, and hopefully world class at picking startups, but also knowing how to go from idea to sustainable business. And that's why I align a lot of my assets with that goal. I'm very focused on startups, and all that I think about is venture, how to go from idea to business. And then I think one question that I read between the lines is, how do you get the assets to become an investor if you realize you need more than 5,000 euros? Of course, there's very different paths. You could go the corporate route, take a job and make sure you do a really good job, excel, make a career in that, and always save. Potentially also invest with your saving into channels that give you a passive income that allow you to grow your investments and your assets over time without spending active time on it. And then, of course, the other route is the one that Silvan is taking and that I've taken, which is go out and start something. Try to make the step from 0 to 1. Come up with an idea, bring a team together, get people excited about it, build something out of nowhere, out of nothing. And then eventually that will pay off. But also very important, I think if you do that, if you start building something with the intent that it's going to make you rich and it's going to enable you to be an investor one day, I think that's very rarely successful. I think you need to really care about the problem that you're solving and the people that you're solving it with in order to be successful and make it through the startup roller coaster.
Yeah, I fully agree there. We always discuss that with Alain, the founder of Swisspreneur, and he often says, like, if you don't want to solve one of your own problems, it's probably not a good idea to start a company around that. And for us, that was exactly the case with Jim Hopper. When we did that back in the days, I was studying in St. Gallen, but often in Zurich, but living still with my parents in Bern over the weekend. And I couldn't train at all these 3 places. So I wanted to have a solution for that. So that was a big motivation, because when you build a startup, there will always be ups and downs. You will face many tough days and big challenges. And if you have your own motivation, why you actually solve this problem, because you want to have a solution that you want to use yourself, that will keep you through these hard and rough times. And then you will just keep going. I think that's essential to then actually also stick to your plan.
Totally agree.
So Cédric, if I look at the time, I think we would have so much more topics to talk about, but I would like to wrap up this session here a bit with a few rapid fire questions for you. Are you up for that?
Of course.
So this week, I think Apple launched or announced a new MacBook or Mac chip in general, the M1. What do you think? Yeah. Is it a tech leap or a marketing gag?
I think what Apple has always excelled in is this end-to-end fit, right? From the very beginning, they tailored their operating system to the hardware that it comes with. And I haven't used Windows in a while, to be honest, but my experience was always that I could feel the difference. The experience was just a tad smoother. And I think this is just another step in that direction where Apple is really owning the full experience, the full user experience, everything that happens from start to finish when you boot up your computer, all the way to when you shut it down. There seems some innovations that seem long overdue. Like I watched part of the presentation, and one of the features, I guess, is that they've now managed that you basically close your laptop and then that shuts it down. And as soon as you open it, it's back up, like kind of like your phone, where you don't really turn off your phone overnight. But with your laptop, maybe you sometimes still do that. So I think that's an innovation. I think personally, I'm going to pass on this generation. I've only just recently upgraded my MacBook and I usually keep them for as long as they're good. So I think I had my last one for 4 or 5 years. So I'm not looking to jump right away. Overall, I think it's going in the right direction. But typically, when the chipset changes, there's also a bit of interruptions and disruptions with some of the applications that I'm used to. So for me, it's probably going to be a pass on this first version. But if there's an M2 next year, maybe I'll take another look. Awesome. What about yourself?
I mean, I'm really fascinated by the way that they integrated everything in one chip. So I just want to see the benchmarks and then decide if it's worth an investment or not. Because mine is a bit lagging and has some screen issues. So it's okay, but it might also be worth to jump ship. Let's see.
And actually, one thing that I thought was interesting is that that's going to allow them to really run iPad and iPhone apps natively on your MacBook.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So we're probably going to see these applications that are kind of multi-platform, which is really interesting.
Yeah, interesting future. So the next question for you is, do you have a favorite day of the week? And if so, why?
Now I would definitely say it's Saturday mornings. It's when I sleep in with Lana. Usually I go in the morning, pick her up from her crib, and then we spend like a couple hours together just laying around playing. And that's definitely my favorite right now. So I'm going to go with Saturday.
Nice. Good one. For you live in Pfäffikon, right? But you also spend a lot of time in Zurich or all over the world if Corona doesn't happen. So the choice is between Pfäffikon or Zurich. What would you choose?
I'd say Pfäffikon for now. I'm really happy here. the lake is so close that I take this walk a couple times a day. It's only 15 minutes down to the lake, and that's just like I really enjoy how close I am to nature here. It always resets me and it calms me, and that's something that be a bit harder to get in Zurich, depending on where I would get a place. But overall, I consider them to be almost the same place. So not a big preference, but for now, I'm really happy with where I am.
Makes sense. What's your favorite junk food?
My favorite junk food? Wait, junk food is like pizzas and hot dogs and hamburgers.
Yeah, exactly. Or whatever you consider as cheat meal when you don't consider healthy for you.
Oh, then I would definitely go with bread, like dark bread with nuts or some seeds. That's definitely my vice. Yeah.
Good. And what is overrated from your perspective? Can be anything.
So this might well, I'm gonna be curious to hear your thoughts on it, but I think overrated or overhyped is the public markets right now. Like I just have no idea how we got to those valuations that we're paying at the moment if we're buying stocks. I mean, I understand that the liquidity that was generated as part of these stimuli packages and all that, it had to go somewhere, and a lot of it seemed to have gone into the stock market. But I just don't find it healthy. I think the stock market currently doesn't really match what we're seeing in the real world, and I don't think it's properly pricing in what's going to happen within the next 12 to 24 months. So I'd be curious to also hear your thoughts, because I know you invest in the public markets as well.
I mean, for me, I'm not too unhappy with how the market is going, but for me, it doesn't really matter. First of all, it's not like big sums or anything of that sort. And second of all, I plan to do that for the next 40, 50 years. So I don't care if the market is going up or down tomorrow or today. I just care for the long-term trend. And I think over the next 40 years, there will be most likely an upside trend. That's all I'm interested in.
Yeah, that I think is the right way to look at it as well. So I'm not saying don't invest or stay away, but I just feel we've reached multiples that at least pale, or like the multiples that we've seen maybe 2 years ago already pale in comparison to what we're seeing today. Right. And that's what leads me to think it's a bit overrated or overhyped. Yeah.
Right. And on the other hand, what do you think is underrated?
Well, I don't know if it's still the case, but I think AirPods are a really spectacular product.
Yep.
Especially with like Big Sur now on the Mac and iOS 14 on iPad and the phone. I just love how they automatically switch from like my desktop to my phone to my iPad. And like I used to own like big headphones to go and travel and be able to sleep on the plane with the noise cancellation features. Yep. And it's so incredible to me that that's all been done with like headphones as small as this, for as little as money as they cost. Super reliable, great battery. So I think AirPods are a bit underrated, or maybe not anymore, but like 2-3 years ago, I think they weren't as popular. And so that was almost my tip for friends when they ask me about my like favorite gadget that they might not have used or might not have bought yet.
It's a great one. Yeah, if you use an iPhone or Apple products in general, that's really the best investment that you can make on top of that.
What is it for you? What is a tip that everyone can take away from this? What is something that you think is underrated?
For me, underrated is like having a calm time, just sitting there thinking or like really not doing much at all, and just taking time to recover and recharge. This is crucial, and I think we're always like so busy doing this and the next thing, myself included. I love running from one thing to the next during the week, but I really also need time to recharge, recover, and just have time to think. And even if it's just like 10 minutes a day where you close your eyes and think and take a couple deep breaths, that's already a good start. But really having that time to think, to be on your own, not having a fully cluttered mind, that's really, really heavily underrated from my perspective.
That's a very good point. Elena and I are discussing if we want to make Sundays like no screen or offline days for a while, to become more calm, to be there for Lana and not be distracted. And so maybe we'll do a first test run this week and see if we can actually do it without phones or without screens.
If you do that, let me know so we can bring that topic up in the next Q&A session.
Of course.
So yeah, I think that's about it, Cédric, for today. Thank you so much for being here again. It's always a lot of fun and a pleasure to have you on the show, basically. And yeah, looking forward to the next one. Hopefully, still one before Christmas.
Yeah, let's make sure we get one in. And thank you for the good preparation, for the questions, for taking the time. Everyone in the audience, thanks for sending in the questions. Good stuff. And we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you all for the questions and your input, and have a great weekend, everyone. See you soon.